In the shadowed corridors of Ravenshollow Palace, where centuries of secrets echo through marble halls, a single moment of rage threatens to unravel the carefully constructed facade of the most powerful royal family in Europe. When Queen Consort Isabella discovers something that could destroy everything she has worked to build, her desperate actions set in motion a chain of events that will shake the very foundations of the monarchy. What happens when the mask of royalty slips and the world glimpses the raw human emotions beneath the crown? Part 1. The autumn rain pelted against the towering windows of Ravenshollow Palace with an intensity that seemed to mirror the storm brewing within its ancient walls. Queen Consort Isabella Ashworth stood before her ornate mirror in the East Wing chambers, her reflection showing a woman who had mastered the art of royal composure over 2 decades of public scrutiny. Yet tonight, beneath the perfectly applied makeup and the carefully styled auburn hair, something darker stirred. The palace staff moved through their evening routines with the precision of a well-oiled machine, unaware that their carefully ordered world was about to be shattered. In the servants' quarters below, whispered conversations carried news that would soon reach every corner of the kingdom. The late Queen Margaret's personal effects, sealed away for 3 years since her tragic death, were finally being catalogued and prepared for the memorial exhibition. Isabella's hands trembled slightly as she dismissed her lady-in-waiting for the evening. The woman, sensing the unusual tension in her mistress's demeanor, hesitated at the door before offering a respectful curtsy and departing. Alone at last, Isabella allowed her mask to slip for just a moment. The weight of maintaining her position as the new queen consort had been crushing, made even more difficult by the constant comparisons to her beloved predecessor. Queen Margaret had been everything Isabella felt she could never be. Naturally graceful, effortlessly charming, and genuinely beloved by the people. Even in death, Margaret's presence loomed large over the palace. Her portrait still adorned the main halls, her charitable foundations continued to bear her name, and, most painfully for Isabella, King Edmund still spoke of her with a reverence that bordered on worship. The marriage between Isabella and King Edmund had been one of political necessity rather than passionate. After Margaret's unexpected death from a riding accident, the kingdom had needed stability, and Edmund had needed a suitable wife to help him navigate his grief while maintaining his royal duties. Isabella, the daughter of a prominent duke and a woman of impeccable breeding, had seemed the perfect choice. What no one had anticipated was how thoroughly Margaret's ghost would continue to haunt their union. As Isabella prepared for bed, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A young chambermaid entered, her face flushed with excitement and nervousness. The girl, barely 18 and new to palace service, carried news that would change everything. "Your Majesty," the maid began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I apologize for the late hour, but I thought you should know immediately. While cataloging Queen Margaret's belongings in the sealed chambers, we discovered something unexpected." Isabella's pulse quickened. She had specifically requested to be informed of any significant discoveries during the process. The memorial exhibition was her initiative, a way to honor Margaret's memory while also, she hoped, finally allowing the kingdom to move forward. But the maid's expression suggested that whatever had been found was far from routine. "What did you discover?" Isabella asked, her voice carefully controlled. The maid glanced nervously toward the door before continuing. "Hidden in the back of Queen Margaret's private wardrobe, we found a collection of letters and documents. They appeared to be personal correspondence, Your Majesty." "Very personal." Isabella's mind raced. Personal correspondence could mean anything, but the maid's obvious discomfort suggested something more significant than simple family letters. "Have these documents been examined by anyone else?" "No, Your Majesty. The head curator thought it best to inform you first, given their delicate nature. He has secured them in the archive room pending your instructions." "Very well," Isabella replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "Inform the head curator that I will examine these documents personally first thing tomorrow morning. Under no circumstances are they to be discussed with anyone else until I have reviewed them thoroughly." Isabella found herself unable to rest. She paced her chambers, her silk nightgown whispering against the marble floor with each step. What secrets had Margaret taken to her grave? What hidden aspects of her seemingly perfect life might now come to light? The night stretched endlessly before her, filled with questions and growing dread. Isabella had always suspected there was more to Margaret's story than the public narrative of a perfect queen and devoted wife. Now it seemed she might finally learn the truth. But as dawn approached and she prepared to face whatever revelations awaited her, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that some secrets were better left buried. The palace awakened slowly around her. Servants beginning their daily routines, guards changing shifts, and the endless machinery of royal protocol grinding into motion. But for Isabella, this day would be unlike any other. Today, she would discover that the woman she had tried so hard to honor and emulate had harbored secrets that could destroy not just her own legacy, but the very foundation of the monarchy itself. As she dressed in her formal day attire, choosing a deep blue ensemble that projected authority and confidence, Isabella steeled herself for what lay ahead. Whatever Margaret had hidden away, whatever truths those documents contained, she would face them as a queen should, with dignity, wisdom, and the strength to do whatever was necessary to protect the crown and the kingdom she had sworn to serve. The morning light filtering through the palace windows seemed different somehow, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. In just a few hours, Isabella's understanding of her predecessor, her marriage, and her role as queen would be forever altered. The woman in the mirror looked back at her with eyes that still held hope that Margaret's secrets would prove benign. By evening, those same eyes would reflect a very different truth. The storm of the previous night had passed, leaving the palace grounds washed clean and gleaming in the morning sun. But another storm was gathering, one that would test Isabella's resolve and challenge everything she thought she knew about the woman whose crown she now wore. In the archive room of Raven's Hollow Palace, beneath layers of silk and satin, the past was waiting to collide with the present in ways that no one could have predicted. Part 2. The archive room of Raven's Hollow Palace existed in a state of perpetual twilight, its tall windows heavily draped to protect the precious documents and artifacts stored within. Isabella entered alone, having dismissed even her most trusted advisors for this private examination. The head curator, an elderly man named Professor Whitmore, who had served the royal family for over 30 years, waited beside a mahogany table where several items lay carefully arranged. "Your Majesty," Professor Whitmore began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed many royal secrets over the decades, "I must emphasize the sensitive nature of what we have discovered. These items were deliberately concealed, hidden behind a false panel in Queen Margaret's private armor. They were never meant to be found." Isabella approached the table with measured steps, her heart pounding despite her outward composure. Before her lay a collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon, several photographs, and what appeared to be a leather-bound journal. The very air seemed heavy with the weight of hidden truths waiting to be unveiled. "Have you examined any of these items yourself, Professor?" Isabella asked. The older man shook his head firmly. "I thought it best to leave that honor to you, Your Majesty. However, I did notice that the letters appear to be written in Queen Margaret's hand, and they span several years. The photographs, well, they are of a rather personal nature." With trembling fingers, Isabella reached for the first letter. The paper was of the finest quality, bearing Margaret's personal seal, but the content made Isabella's blood run cold. The letter was addressed to someone called "My Dearest William" and contained expressions of love and longing that were decidedly not meant for King Edmund. As Isabella read further, the true scope of Margaret's deception became clear. The letters revealed a passionate affair that had lasted for years, conducted in secret locations away from the palace. Margaret wrote of stolen moments in countryside cottages, of clandestine meetings during official state functions, and of her desperate desire to be free from the constraints of royal duty. "My beloved William," one letter read, "each day that passes without your touch feels like an eternity. This golden cage they call a palace becomes more suffocating with each passing season. If only we could escape together somewhere far from crowns and protocols, where we could simply be ourselves." They showed Margaret in intimate moments with a man Isabella didn't recognize, a handsome gentleman with dark hair and kind eyes, clearly not of royal blood. The photographs captured stolen kisses in garden gazebos, tender embraces by moonlit lakes, and moments of pure joy that Isabella had never seen on Margaret's face during official portraits. Professor Whitmore cleared his throat softly. "Your Majesty, should you need privacy to process this information, I can certainly withdraw." "No," Isabella replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "Your discretion in this matter will be essential. What else have you discovered?" The journal proved to be even more devastating. Margaret's private thoughts, recorded in her elegant handwriting, revealed not just the affair but her profound unhappiness with royal life. She wrote of feeling trapped, of the constant scrutiny that made genuine emotion impossible, and of her growing resentment toward King Edmund, whom she described as a good man cursed with a crown that has drained all warmth from his soul. One entry, dated just months before her death, proved particularly shocking. "William has asked me to leave everything behind. He has secured passage to America, where we could start fresh away from all of this. Part of me longs to say yes to cast off these heavy jewels and heavier responsibilities. But the scandal would destroy Edmund, and despite everything, I cannot bring myself to inflict such pain upon him. I am trapped between love and duty, and I fear I will never find peace in either choice." As Isabella continued reading, she discovered that Margaret had been planning to end the affair in the weeks before her fatal accident. The final letters to William were filled with farewell sentiments and explanations of why she could never abandon her royal duties, no matter the cost to her personal happiness. But it was the discovery of Margaret's wedding gown, carefully preserved in a sealed garment bag, that pushed Isabella over the edge of rational thought. The gown was exquisite, a masterpiece of silk, lace, and pearls that had been photographed extensively during the wedding ceremony that the entire world had celebrated. It represented everything Isabella had been trying to live up to: the perfect royal bride who had captured King Edmund's heart and the nation's admiration. Now, knowing the truth about Margaret's secret life, the gown seemed to mock everything Isabella believed about marriage. The woman who had worn this gown had been living a lie, maintaining a facade of perfect royal devotion while conducting a passionate affair behind her husband's back. Isabella's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. The weight of 3 years of constant comparison to a woman who now stood revealed as a fraud overwhelmed her. Without thinking clearly, she reached for a pair of archival scissors that lay on Professor Whitmore's desk. "Your Majesty, please," the professor pleaded, recognizing the dangerous glint in Isabella's eyes. "Perhaps we should discuss how to handle this information before making any irreversible decisions." The months of feeling inadequate, of living in the shadow of Margaret's supposedly perfect memory, of enduring King Edmund's obvious preference for his deceased wife over his living one, had finally taken their toll. The pristine wedding gown became a symbol of everything false and hypocritical about the royal institution she had dedicated her life to serving. "She was a fraud," Isabella whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of rage and pain. "All these years, Edmund has worshipped the memory of a woman who was betraying him. The entire kingdom mourns a queen who was planning to abandon her throne for another man." Professor Whitmore watched in growing alarm as Isabella raised the scissors toward the precious garment. The gown, beyond its monetary value, represented a piece of royal history that could never be replaced. More importantly, the professor understood that destroying it would be an act Isabella would likely regret for the rest of her life. "Your Majesty," he said urgently, "I implore you to consider the implications. Whatever Queen Margaret's private failings, destroying this artifact will not change the past. It will only create new problems that could prove even more damaging to the crown." But Isabella seemed not to hear him. In her mind, the gown represented every lie, every moment of inadequacy she had felt, every comparison that had made her feel like a poor substitute for a woman who now stood revealed as utterly unworthy of the pedestal upon which she had been placed. As the scissors drew closer to the delicate silk, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the archive room. Someone was coming, and Isabella's moment of private reckoning was about to become very public indeed. The secrets that had remained hidden for 3 years were on the verge of explosive revelation. and the careful order of Raven's Hollow Palace was about to be shattered forever. Part 3. The heavy oak doors of the archive room burst open with a force that sent a tremor through the carefully controlled atmosphere. Prince William Ashworth, King Edmund's younger brother and Isabella's brother-in-law, strode into the room with the urgent determination of a man who had sensed impending disaster. Behind him followed 2 palace guards, their hands resting cautiously on their ceremonial weapons, though their expressions suggested they were more confused than prepared for actual conflict. "Isabella, step away from that gown immediately," William commanded, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of royal blood. His piercing blue eyes took in the scene before him, his sister-in-law standing over the historic wedding dress with scissors raised, Professor Whitmore frozen in apparent terror, and scattered documents that clearly contained explosive information. Isabella's head snapped up, her face a mask of fury and anguish that William had never seen before. The typically composed queen consort looked like a woman on the edge of complete breakdown, her carefully styled hair disheveled from her emotional turmoil, her eyes bright with unshed tears and rage. "You don't understand," Isabella said, her voice cracking with emotion. "None of you understand what she really was. This gown, this symbol of perfect royal marriage. It's all built on lies and deception." William moved closer, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture, but his eyes never left the scissors in Isabella's grip. As King Edmund's brother and a senior member of the royal family, he had been trained from childhood to handle crises with diplomacy and calm authority. However, nothing in his education had prepared him for this particular situation. "Whatever you've discovered, Isabella, destroying Margaret's wedding gown is not the solution. Think about what you're doing. This dress is part of our family's history, part of the nation's heritage. Once it's destroyed, it can never be recovered." Professor Whitmore found his voice at last. "Your Highness, I believe Her Majesty has made some disturbing discoveries regarding Queen Margaret's private life. The documents we found hidden in her chambers appear to contain information of a very sensitive nature." William's expression darkened as the implications became clear. He had always been closer to Margaret than his brother Edmund, and he had sometimes suspected that her perfect public image might not tell the complete story of her private struggles. But whatever secrets had been uncovered, he understood that their exposure could have catastrophic consequences for the monarchy. "Isabella," William said, his voice gentle but firm, "I need you to put down those scissors and tell me exactly what you found. We can work through this together, but not if you do something irreversible in a moment of anger." "Work through this?" Isabella laughed bitterly, the sound echoing strangely in the quiet archive room. "How do you work through discovering that the woman everyone holds up as the perfect queen was conducting a passionate affair for years? How do you work through learning that your husband's beloved first wife was planning to abandon the crown for another man?" The guards exchanged nervous glances, clearly uncomfortable with witnessing what appeared to be a private royal family crisis of unprecedented proportions. Palace protocol had no guidelines for situations where one queen threatened to destroy another queen's wedding dress while revealing explosive family secrets. William absorbed this information with the practiced composure of someone accustomed to royal scandals, though his face paled slightly at the implications. If Margaret had indeed been unfaithful to King Edmund, and if this information became public knowledge, it could destroy not just her posthumous reputation, but potentially destabilize the entire monarchy. "Show me the evidence," William said quietly. Isabella gestured wildly toward the table where the letters and photographs lay scattered. "It's all there. Years of love letters to someone named William. Intimate photographs. Journal entries describing how trapped she felt, how much she resented her royal duties, how she wanted to escape to America with her lover." William approached the table carefully, his eyes scanning the damning evidence while keeping one eye on Isabella and her dangerous proximity to the wedding gown. As he read the first few lines of Margaret's correspondence, his face grew increasingly grave. The implications were even worse than he had feared. "Isabella, I understand your shock and anger," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But consider this. Margaret is dead. She has been dead for 3 years. Whatever mistake she made, whatever pain she caused destroying this gown will not undo any of it. It will only create new pain, new scandal, new damage to the crown." "The crown?" Isabella repeated mockingly. "Always the crown. What about the truth? What about justice? Edmund has spent 3 years mourning a woman who is betraying him, comparing me unfavorably to someone who didn't deserve his devotion. The entire kingdom has been grieving for a lie. If I may suggest, Your Majesty, perhaps these documents could be secured and the matter discussed privately among the senior royals. There may be ways to handle this situation that protect both the truth and the stability of the monarchy." "Secure them?" Isabella's voice rose dangerously. "Hide them away like Margaret hid her lies. Pretend this never happened so we can continue living in her false shadow?" William recognized the dangerous escalation in Isabella's tone and decided that direct action was necessary. The situation had moved beyond diplomatic persuasion, and he could see that his sister-in-law was moments away from an action that could not be undone. "Guards," he commanded sharply, "restrain the queen consort. Do not harm her, but prevent her from damaging the artifacts." The guards hesitated for a crucial moment, caught between conflicting loyalties. They were sworn to protect the royal family, but being asked to physically restrain the queen consort was unprecedented and legally ambiguous. Their hesitation gave Isabella the opening she needed. With a cry of rage and anguish that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, Isabella brought the scissors down toward the delicate silk of Margaret's wedding gown. The blade caught the light as it descended, and for a moment time seemed suspended in the archive room as everyone present realized they were witnessing a moment that would forever change the history of the royal family. The scissors made contact with the fabric, and the sound of tearing silk filled the air like a physical wound. Isabella had managed to slash through one of the intricate lace panels before William lunged forward, grabbing her wrist and wresting the scissors from her grasp. "Cease the fight!" William shouted, his voice echoing through the room with commanding authority. "Guards, secure this room immediately. No one enters or leaves without my express permission." As Isabella collapsed into a chair, sobbing with the release of 3 years of pent-up emotion and frustration, William surveyed the damage. The wedding gown bore a significant tear, but it was not completely destroyed. More importantly, the explosive documents remained intact, and the secret of Margaret's double life was still contained within this room. But William knew that this was only the beginning. The discovery of Margaret's affair and Isabella's violent reaction to it had created a crisis that would require all of his diplomatic skills to resolve. The future of the monarchy itself might depend on how carefully they navigated the treacherous waters that lay ahead. In the silence that followed, broken only by Isabella's quiet weeping, everyone present understood that they had witnessed something that could never be undone, never be forgotten, and never be easily resolved. The carefully constructed world of royal propriety had been shattered, and putting it back together would require wisdom, discretion, and perhaps a complete reevaluation of what it truly meant to serve the crown. Part 4. The great hall of Raven's Hollow Palace had witnessed centuries of royal councils, diplomatic negotiations, and family crises, but never quite like this one. King Edmund sat at the head of the ancient oak table, his face ashen and aged beyond his 45 years, while the devastating evidence of his late wife's betrayal lay spread before him like accusations written in elegant script. Prince William stood beside a massive window, his silhouette dark against the gray afternoon sky, while Isabella sat rigidly in her chair, no longer weeping but maintaining a stony silence that spoke volumes about her emotional state. Professor Whitmore, sworn to secrecy and visibly shaken by the morning's revelations, had been dismissed after securing all evidence in the palace vault. "Read it again," King Edmund said quietly, his voice barely audible in the vast chamber. The letter dated March 15th, 3 months before her death. William reluctantly picked up the correspondence and began to read aloud. "My beloved William, I grow weary of this charade that is my life. Each public appearance feels like a performance in a play I never auditioned for. speaking lines written by others about a love I do not feel. When I am with you, I remember who I was before the crown, before the endless protocols and empty ceremonies. King Edmund flinched as if physically struck. 22 years, he whispered. We were married for 22 years. When did it begin, this relationship? Isabella finally spoke, her voice hoarse from the morning's emotional outburst. Based on the dates of the earliest letters, approximately 5 years into your marriage. The affair continued until just weeks before her accident. The king's hands trembled as he reached for one of the photographs showing Margaret in an intimate embrace with her mysterious lover. The woman in the image bore little resemblance to the composed, dutiful queen the world had known. This Margaret smiled with genuine joy, her eyes bright with passion and life in a way Edmund realized he had never witnessed during their marriage. Did I fail her so completely? Edmund asked, though the question seemed directed more to himself than to anyone else in the room. Was our life together truly so unbearable that she felt compelled to seek love elsewhere? William turned from the window, his face etched with concern for his brother. Edmund, you cannot blame yourself for Margaret's choices. You were a faithful, devoted husband. You gave her everything a woman could want: love, respect, position, purpose. Did I? Edmund's laugh was bitter and hollow. Listen to this. He picked up Margaret's journal and read from an entry dated 2 years before her death. Edmund speaks to me of love, but his love is for the queen, not for Margaret. He loves the woman who waves from palace balconies and cuts ribbons at charity events. He has never known the woman who dreams of running barefoot through meadows or staying up all night discussing philosophy and poetry. That woman exists only when I am with William. Isabella stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Perhaps she was right to feel trapped, she said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. Perhaps the problem isn't that Margaret was unfaithful, but that this entire system forces people to live lies. How many royal marriages are built on duty rather than love? How many queens have smiled and waved while dying inside? Both brothers looked at her with surprise. Despite the morning's breakdown, Isabella's words carried a clarity that cut through their shock and self-recrimination. You think I don't know what people say about our marriage? Isabella continued. That it was a convenient arrangement after Margaret's death? That you needed a suitable wife to maintain stability while you grieved for your true love? They're right, Edmund. You married me because it was expected, not because you loved me. And I accepted because refusing a king is not an option for a woman of my position. King Edmund's face flushed with shame. Isabella, that's not. I have grown to care for you deeply. Grown to care, Isabella repeated sadly. Yes, exactly. You have grown to care for me while continuing to worship the memory of a woman who was betraying you. And now that we know the truth about Margaret, what changes? Will you suddenly transfer that worship to me? Will you finally see me as more than a pale substitute for your perfect first wife? William watched this exchange with growing alarm. The crisis that had begun with the discovery of Margaret's letters was expanding into something much larger, threatening not just the reputation of a dead queen, but the stability of the current royal marriage. We need to focus on practical matters, William interjected. The immediate question is how to handle this information. The morning's incident with the wedding gown cannot be covered up entirely. Too many people were present. Professor Whitmore can be trusted, but the guards who witnessed Isabella's breakdown will require careful management. Edmund looked up from Margaret's journal with haunted eyes. What would you have me do, William? Release a statement informing the nation that their beloved Queen Margaret was an adulteress who planned to abandon her throne for another man. Destroy her memory and cast doubt on the legitimacy of everything she accomplished during her reign? No, Isabella said firmly. That would serve no purpose except revenge, and I am not interested in revenge against a dead woman. But neither can we continue living with the lie. I will not spend the rest of my life competing with a ghost, especially now that I know how unworthy that ghost was of the pedestal upon which she was placed. William began pacing the length of the hall, his mind working through possible solutions.
There may be a middle path, he said slowly.
We could acknowledge that Margaret, like all people, was complex and human. we could honor her public accomplishments while allowing her private struggles to humanize her memory rather than destroy it." "And the man she was involved with?" Edmund asked. "The letters are signed only with a first name, but surely someone must know who he was. What if he decides to come forward with his own version of events?" Isabella moved to the window where William had been standing, gazing out at the palace gardens where she had often walked alone, thinking about Margaret's ghost haunting every pathway. "Then we deal with that when it happens," she said, "but we do it honestly without trying to maintain impossible facades." "The damaged wedding gown will need to be explained somehow," William pointed out. "It was being prepared for the memorial exhibition. Its absence or visible damage will be noticed." Christine stood slowly, his movements those of a man who had aged years in the space of hours. "Cancel the exhibition," he said quietly. "Announce that upon further reflection, the royal family has decided that Margaret's memory is better honored through the continuation of her charitable works rather than a display of material artifacts." "And if people ask questions," William pressed, "then we tell them that some things are too precious and personal to be put on public display," Edmund replied. "It's not entirely untrue." Isabella turned back to face both men, her expression resolute. "I have one condition," she said. "No more comparisons. No more references to how Margaret would have handled situations differently. No more suggestions that I should model myself after her example. If we are going to move forward as a family and as a monarchy, it has to be based on who we actually are, not on the fantasy of who we thought she was." King Edmund met his wife's gaze for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time the strong, intelligent woman he had married rather than the convenient replacement for Margaret he had unconsciously expected her to be. "Agreed," he said simply. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across the great hall, the three royal family members began the delicate work of reconstructing their relationships and their understanding of the past. The discovery of Margaret's secret life had shattered their assumptions about love, duty, and truth, but from those shattered pieces they would have to build something new. The woman they had thought they knew was gone forever, replaced by a more complex figure whose struggles and failures made her paradoxically more human, and perhaps, in accepting that complexity, they could find a way to build more honest relationships among the living. Outside the palace walls, the kingdom continued its daily life, unaware that everything their royal family thought they knew about themselves had changed forever. The real work of healing would begin now in quiet conversations and gradual understanding as they learned to live with truth instead of comfortable illusions. Part 5. 6 months after the discovery that shattered the foundations of the royal family, Ravenshollow Palace had settled into a new rhythm. The autumn light filtering through the palace windows seemed different somehow, less heavy with the weight of unspoken truths and hidden resentments. In the blue drawing room, King Edmund and Queen Isabella sat together for their weekly private meeting, a tradition they had established to ensure their marriage would be built on honest communication rather than royal protocol. "The final report from the investigation came through today," Edmund said, setting down a leather folder on the table between them. After months of discreet inquiry, they had finally identified Margaret's lover, William Hartwell, a professor of literature at Oxford University who had met the late Queen during one of her educational charity visits. He had died in a car accident just 1 month after Margaret's own death, taking their secrets with him to the grave. Isabella picked up the folder but didn't open it immediately. "Do we really need to know more details? We've established that the affair was real, that it lasted several years, and that both participants are now deceased. What more is there to understand?" Edmund considered this carefully. Over the past months, he had done considerable soul-searching about his marriage to Margaret and his role in her unhappiness. The man who had been devastated by the initial revelation had gradually evolved into someone more thoughtful and self-aware. "I suppose I wanted to understand how I failed to see what was happening in my own home," he admitted. "Margaret and I shared meals, attended functions together, even took family vacations. How could she maintain such an elaborate deception for so long?" Isabella reached across the table and took his hand, a gesture that had become natural between them as they worked to build genuine intimacy. Perhaps because you were both maintaining deceptions, she said gently. She was pretending to be happy in a marriage that felt like a prison, and you were pretending that royal duty could substitute for emotional connection. It was a harsh assessment, but one that Edmund had come to accept as largely accurate. His marriage to Margaret had been built on mutual respect and shared responsibility rather than passionate love. They had been partners in the business of monarchy, efficient and effective, but perhaps never truly intimate in the way that mattered most. "The memorial garden is nearly complete," Isabella said, changing the subject to lighter matters. They had decided to honor Margaret's memory by creating a private garden within the palace grounds, featuring her favorite flowers and including benches where visitors could sit quietly and reflect. It was a more personal tribute than the elaborate public exhibition that had been canceled. "I'd like to include a small plaque," Edmund said, "something that acknowledges her complexity rather than perpetuating the myth of perfection. Perhaps something about how she struggled to balance public duty with private happiness." Isabella smiled, genuinely pleased by this suggestion. The early months after the revelation had been difficult, filled with arguments and recriminations as they all processed their anger and disappointment. But gradually, they had found ways to honor both truth and compassion in their approach to Margaret's memory. Prince William entered the drawing room carrying a silver tray with afternoon tea. This small domestic gesture had become his way of showing support for his brother and sister-in-law as they worked to rebuild their relationship. The crisis had brought the three of them closer together, united by shared knowledge and a commitment to protecting both each other and the monarchy. "Any word from Professor Hartwell's family?" William asked as he poured the tea. They had discovered that Margaret's lover had a sister who still lived in Oxford, though she appeared to know nothing about the affair, and they had decided to leave her in peace. "His sister has decided to donate his personal papers to the university library," Edmund reported. "She found some items that she didn't understand, including several poems that appear to have been inspired by Margaret, though they're written carefully enough to protect her identity. They'll become part of the general collection without any specific attribution." Isabella sipped her tea thoughtfully. "In a way, it's almost romantic," she said. "Two people who found genuine love despite impossible circumstances, even though they could never fully be together. I've stopped being angry with Margaret and started feeling sorry for her." This represented a significant evolution in Isabella's thinking. The rage and jealousy that had driven her to attack the wedding gown had gradually transformed into something more nuanced and compassionate. She had come to understand that Margaret's betrayal said more about the constraints of royal life than about any personal failing. "I've been thinking about our own legacy," Edmund said, addressing both his wife and his brother. "How do we ensure that future generations of royals don't find themselves trapped in the same impossible situations? How do we create space for genuine human emotion within the structure of monarchy? Are you suggesting changes to royal protocol?" "I'm suggesting that we acknowledge what we've learned," Edmund replied, "that people need authentic connections, that duty without love becomes a prison, and that the monarchy serves the nation best when it's staffed by genuinely fulfilled human beings rather than perfectly controlled automatons. We could start with small changes. More privacy for royal children to develop relationships naturally, less rigid scheduling that allows for spontaneous family time. Perhaps even acknowledging that royal marriages should be based on genuine compatibility rather than just political suitability. It won't be easy, William warned. The establishment has invested centuries in maintaining certain traditions and expectations. But Margaret's story shows us what happens when those expectations become intolerable, Edmund pointed out. Better to evolve voluntarily than to have change forced upon us by scandal or rebellion. As the afternoon progressed, their conversation moved from the painful lessons of the past to hopeful plans for the future. They discussed how to honor Margaret's genuine accomplishments while learning from her struggles, how to build more honest relationships within the royal family, and how to serve their nation while remaining true to their humanity. The damaged wedding gown had been carefully repaired by the palace's master seamstresses and placed in long-term storage, neither displayed nor destroyed. Like Margaret's memory itself, it existed in a state between preservation and transformation, holding both beauty and pain in its delicate folds. "I have something for you," Isabella said to Edmund as their meeting drew to a close. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a small wrapped package. "I've been working on this for months." Edmund opened the package to find a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and ready for new stories. "I thought you might want to begin recording your own thoughts and experiences," Isabella explained. "Not for posterity or official records, but for yourself. A place where you can be honest about the challenges and joys of being both a king and a man." Edmund was visibly moved by the gesture. "Thank you," he said simply. "I think I would like that very much." As evening approached and the palace settled into its nighttime routines, the three family members went their separate ways, each carrying the weight and wisdom of the lessons they had learned. The discovery of Margaret's secret life had nearly destroyed them, but ultimately it had forced them to confront truths about themselves and their relationships that made them stronger. Margaret's ghost no longer haunted the corridors of Raven's Hollow Palace, replaced by a more complex understanding of a woman who had struggled, failed, and died before she could find her way to happiness. In accepting her humanity, they had found their own path to more authentic lives within the ancient constraints of royalty. The kingdom continued to function, its citizens unaware of the personal revolution that had occurred within their royal family. But those changes would ripple outward over time, creating a monarchy that was more honest, more compassionate, and more genuinely human than it had been in generations. In the end, Margaret's greatest contribution to the crown she had worn would not be the perfect public image she had maintained, but the heart